What's up, everybody? I'm Athan Hristodulu, and you are watching a Power Rankings edition of the Greeks Gridiron. It is Monday, May 31st, 2021. I am foregoing an episode today, or a live show, rather. There is no real news to report from the previous show I had this past Thursday till now. So I decided to take this opportunity to start up something new for the channel. We are going to be going through rankings of each and every single division, one by one by one. I'll be starting with the AFC first, then doing the NFC second. I'll go division by division. Today we are discussing the AFC North. What this will end up leading into is a complete power ranking for the AFC itself and then the NFC itself, and then ultimately leading to my entire 32 power ranking edition, which I'm hoping to get done closer towards the start of a season once things are, kind of not settled in stone, but we have a much better idea as to how the teams are really going to be looking as we head into the week one of the NFL season. So without further ado, let's get things underway, shall we? To my left here is going to be where you are going to be seeing the visuals for the rankings as we go by one. I'll be starting with number 4, leading in all the way to number 1. Like I said, we're discussing the AFC North today. This, I'm going to start out for any of you that are watching, Bengals, Ravens, Steelers, Browns fans, all you guys. This was a hard division to grade. I've already done 3 so far that I've yet to record. And this by far was probably the hardest one to put together. A lot of tough decision making, especially at like the 2 and 3 spots. I think I sat down for the better part of a couple of hours at least, just trying to make sense of where I should be putting some of these teams. And I already know I'm going to get some heat, so I'm prepared for it. I'm trying to keep my opinions as unbiased as possible. Just to go into this, I am a Colts fan, so for any of you watching this, I have real no bias to any of these teams. So starting out with number 4, this is one that I don't think is really, and not to slight you guys, but not much of a surprise here. At number 4, I have selected the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that there's still a lot to prove with this team here. Just a couple of the things that I have listed off from my notes. And this one, first things first, I'm not a big fan of the Ja'Marr Chase pick. This was something that I was gunning for offensive line for them. I wanted to see them go after Penei Sewell. I've discussed this at length a couple of different times in different things that we've talked about on the channel. I understand the pick. I actually gave the Bengals the number 1 worst pick in the first round of the draft, picking Ja'Marr Chase instead of going offensive line with that number 5 spot. I understand going after Ja'Marr Chase, and I've talked about this before, but I'll reiterate it again if you have not seen. I understand the pick, the connection. I think there's a very solid reasoning behind it. The biggest issue, though, is that Joe Burrow went down to injury last year, and it wasn't because he didn't have weapons to throw to. It's because that offensive line could not protect him. They've done a little bit to help with that offensive line, but Penei Sewell is regarded as, people assume he's going to be an all-pro guy and he's going to be holding down the fort for at least, 10 plus years on the offensive line over there in Detroit. So I struggle with that pick. So it was very jarring to me, in my opinion. I really think they should have gone offensive line there. So with that, on top of that, there's a lot of question marks with the team. Remaking the entire secondary, essentially bringing in Mike Hilton and Troy. Is it Troy Hill? Why didn't I write their name in my notes? But they remade the entire secondary. And then on top of that, bringing in somebody like Trey Hendrickson, which is a real question mark because you don't know whether his success is tailored more towards the scheme that they were running in New Orleans and the people playing around him, or whether or not he's going to be a legit guy. They lost Carl Lawson through free agency. So I mean, is he better than Carl Lawson, or are they just interchangeable, or is Trey Hendrickson not as good as Carl Lawson? It's a real shakeup on the defense, and in my opinion, this defense is going to live or die by these big remakings here, especially in that secondary. When you tear it down and basically start over, safety position pretty much settled, but when you're resetting your cornerback position, that is tough. They're going to have to learn the scheme and kind of reset things there. So a big question mark for me. And honestly, they're going to need a strong performance from this draft class that they brought in, for them to really leapfrog and maybe be the number 3 or number 2 team of this division. And I think it would be very difficult for them to push for number 1. They need production from a lot of their rookies, and they need it quickly. Ja'Marr Chase needs to produce from day one and produce like a number 1. Them going Ja'Marr Chase instead of offensive lineman, whether it was Penei Sewell or anyone else that could have been a good spot at the tackle position, he needs to be like Justin Jefferson good. He needs to be putting close to, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 yards, something like that. He needs 7, 8, 9, 10 touchdown catches. He needs to be a number one, especially with the loss of A.J. Green. I know he didn't really do too much towards the last few years of his time in Cincinnati. A lot of injuries hampering his complete production. So there's just a lot of question marks for the Bengals, and I think that at number 4, I feel fine putting them there. Could they potentially sneak in, be like a number 3 or a number 2 team? Of course, they could surprise, but right now I think number 4 is where they belong just based off of what I've seen from them so far this offseason. Now, going into number 3, and honestly, going through 1, 2, and 3 the Bengals pick was probably the most sure pick for me. I had them decided there pretty much before I even started putting this together. Going through 1, 2, and 3, trying to decide where everyone goes, and I know I'm going to get flack for this, so I'm bracing myself for it. I'm nervous to even hit the next scene button here. I'm going to go in and place number 3 Pittsburgh Steelers for the AFC North. This was really tough for me to kind of decide and shake down. I think there's a lot of questions as to whether Ben Roethlisberger's arm is going to be able to survive now a 17-game season and into the offseason. His production... I don't want to say it really slipped last year. It's just his arm strength kind of depleted over time. He did put up a ton of yardage, 500 yards, 5 touchdowns in that game against the Cleveland Browns. He wasn't really the issue there. The issue was more so, it was the depth and on the defense and then the offensive line as well. The offensive line was banged up. They lost Villanova. They lost Maurkice Pouncey, and they have not really found like the sure starters to replace those guys. That's going to be kind of something that we're going to have to look at as they go through training camp and who's going to win the position battles there. But losing a center, especially Maurkice Pouncey, is huge. Villanueva, depending on who you talk to, will argue whether that's really a big loss or not for the team. I think it's significant enough that it's worth mentioning. But the real thing that I need to look at here and I want to bring up is the fact, the drafting of Najee Harris. If this offensive line can get put together and Najee Harris produces like everyone's expecting him to be, I think everyone wanted to see him go to Pittsburgh. He fit the black and gold like football running style to a T. I think that this could be, he could be a big difference maker. He could be a real reason for as to why they end up being at number 2 or number 3 in the division come the end of the year. So I don't want to like completely write them off and say that the Steelers can't win this division. They could very well come back and, be just as good, if not better than last year. Who knows? But I think that, depth on defense was something that really started to show its head towards the end of the season, especially when TJ Watt was down. And so that'll be something that has to be looked at as we go through the later part of the season. Can Ben Roethlisberger, after another year, age 39, is he able to keep his arm intact enough, especially in that later portion of the season? I think that there's just a fair amount of questions here, with some things being answered, but still a lot needing answering, and things that we won't even be able to find out until we get to that later half of the year. So, with the Pittsburgh Steelers being in at number 3, I'm going to now go ahead and just flip over to the next scene. The number 1 and 2 spot was pretty tough. Man, I was really torn at who I wanted to put here, and I'm bracing myself for this one as well. The AFC North, man, was probably the hardest one to decide on out of everything that I've done so far. I really hope that the other divisions are not this difficult. The AFC North is just so competitive, and I want people to understand that the way I'm putting this together is like I spent a lot of time trying to decide on this, and there is a strong possibility that this whole thing is going to be completely wrong, and that pretty much anyone in this division can be in a different place by inches here and there. There's a very, very small separation between 1s, 2, and 3 here. I'm going to go and place the Baltimore Ravens at number 2. I like what the Ravens have done this offseason. Signing Villanueva and Zeitler show a commitment to protecting Lamar Jackson and improving that offensive line, which, as a Colts fan, I say this all the time. I love the offensive line. I love seeing teams commit to the offensive line because everything starts with them on offense. And if you do not have a strong offensive line, forget about it. And on top of that, bringing in people like Tyus Bowser, Sammy Watkins. This is adding strength and depth to unit of needs. Whether Sammy Watkins can stay on the field and be healthy will be huge for them. But then on top of that, drafting guys like, Rashad Bateman, this is they have such a, and on top of that, Odafe Owe and Cleveland as well. They drafted well. They filled positions of need. They got younger at certain positions. The loss of Matthew Judon is going to be maybe a little tough to replace, but I'm assuming that Baltimore hopes Odafe Owe can kind of fill in that spot there. there. There's a lot to like about this team, and there's very strong promise. And I'm gonna go out and say this right now: Lamar Jackson, did he slip and maybe take a step back coming off of his MVP season the year prior? Sure, fair argument. 10 passing touchdowns less. However, you're not going to have an MVP type year every single season. I think it's crazy that people knocked Lamar the way they did. I'm not going to get into like quarterback rankings, but I'm going to go ahead and say that Lamar Jackson is among some of the best quarterbacks in the league. You don't just win MVP by a fluke. That doesn't happen, and the fact that some people think that is a little bit absurd to me. So I think that, he's been criticized a little bit more than he should be as far as his production goes. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. You bring in Sammy Watkins, Rashad Bateman. Those are two guys that Bateman has so much upside on him, and Sammy Watkins, when healthy, can be a difference maker for the team. I think that they're really trying to set Lamar Jackson up for success, shoring up that offensive line. The defense was not the issue of the team last year, so things are looking really good in Baltimore, and I feel very, very strongly about them. And I think that, this is very well going to be another 10, 11, maybe 12 or 13 win team for sure. For sure. I would be shocked to see them slip below 10 wins, if I'm being completely honest with you, and I would even go as far as to say even 11. Now, obviously that remains with number one being the Cleveland Browns. I'm trying to not jump on the Cleveland Brown bandwagon here with this pick because, they're like the darlings, I feel like, of the NFC North right now in terms of on paper. They just look so good. They've pretty much just kind of reloaded themselves going into this next season. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and say that I think that Baker Mayfield has established himself as the quarterback of this team going forward, and he should be around for at least a handful of years. On top of that, they've upgraded the defense, signings like John Johnson, Jadeveon Clowney, Troy Hill, Anthony Walker, all upgrades in those positions that they're going to be playing at. So the defense was already good and got even better on top of that. I know some people are kind of like shaky on them, especially based off their performance when Patrick Mahomes went out during that AFC divisional game and they were not able to get the job done. You would think that that was Cleveland's opportunity to knock, the Chiefs out of the playoffs, but say what you want. They've gone after some players. They've made their defense better. And honestly, on top of that, solid draft class. They are poised to challenge the AFC heavyweights as a heavyweight themselves. And this is a team that I really like. I think is looking really strong going into next season. As long as they just continue to build off what they did last year. And it took them a little bit early on. I think that Cleveland looked a lot better second half of the season than they did first half of the season. There's just so much to like. Odell Beckham's returning, and, he should be a star on that team, especially with how comfortable Baker Mayfield looked in that offense last year towards the later half of the season, and then they got the two running backs over there, Chubb, and they got Kareem Hunt. Cleveland is looking really good, and on paper, they should win this division. They made a big statement last year knocking off Pittsburgh in the playoffs, and I expect them to continue to trend upward going into this next season. There's a lot to like about them. I really respect what they're doing out there, and I'm really excited to see the growth, and I hope that they continue to trend in the right direction because it would be the most Browns thing for them to just crash and burn and end up going like 7-10 or 6-11 or something like that with this 17-game season. So I hope that that's not the case. I want to see Cleveland continue to succeed. I really think they're starting to put everything together, and this team on paper just looks really good. And I think that they can compete with the Bills, with the Chiefs, and those AFC heavyweights for sure going into this next season. But that is my grading for the AFC North to my left here. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. We are at 92 subscribers, and I'm really excited about that. I feel like the numbers have kind of been slowly climbing up the last few weeks, so make sure you hit the subscribe button, like, comment, share, all that good stuff. But I appreciate you all for watching this Power Rankings edition of the Greeks Gridiron. I'll catch you guys again later. Have a good rest of your day.